Good morning, everyone. I hope you're keeping well, and that you're doing all right at the moment. And again, just let me say, if you need anything, do get in touch, and we'll try our best to help you. Also, just to say for Lighthouse Club folks, we had a bit of difficulty getting the Lighthouse Club video that was pre-recorded last week up onto YouTube. It is up now, so Lighthouse Club. If you want to have a look at it, it's on YouTube. It's been on Facebook as well for a while. If your mum or dad have Facebook, then you can get onto that and you can watch it there as well. And then a reminder, midweek is at 7:30 on Wednesday night, and the link is in the newsletter, and I'll send it on the WhatsApp group as well. We're going to read this morning from Mark chapter 6, and this is part of the passage that we're going to be looking at on Sunday morning coming as well, so we're sort of getting a bit ahead of ourselves, but that's okay. We're going to read from Mark 6, verses 1 to 6. He went away from there and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. And on the Sabbath he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get these things? What is the wisdom given to him? How are such mighty works done by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, son of Mary, the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor, except in his hometown and among his relatives and in his own household." And he could do no mighty work there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. It's a strange episode. It's interesting that the residents of Nazareth, where Jesus grew up, seem to ask all the right questions. Where does he get this wisdom? What is his authority for doing this? How is he doing these miracles? And then ultimately, who is he? We know who he is. He's the carpenter. We've seen him grow up. We've seen him as a child. We've seen him as a teenager. We've seen him take on the trade of the carpenter's shop. We know who he is. And I suppose the question that they're really asking is, who does he think he is? And they're asking it in that way, that sort of, really? Who do you think you are? Coming back here and doing all this, and we knew you whenever you were knee-high to a grasshopper, so to speak. Who do you think you are? Familiarity, of course, we're told, does breed contempt, and there may be an element of that in this, but it's also clear, as Luke's account of this episode tells us, that Jesus also came to Nazareth with a deeply unpopular message, comparing the faith of those in his hometown to faith of people who were totally outside of Israel, and bringing about their anger because he was comparing them to Gentiles. So it's not totally unsurprising that they would react the way they do, that they would think of him as an upstart, as a jumped up little so-and-so. They simply would not be prepared to believe him. J.C. Ryle talks about this. Find the book. J.C. Ryle talks about this in his little thoughts on the Gospels. And he says this: "They would not believe that one whose face they knew so well, and who had lived so long eating and drinking and dressing like one of themselves, had any right to claim their attention. They were offended at him." They knew him so well, but they weren't prepared to listen to him because, partly, they knew him so well. So they treat him with contempt. Of course, Jesus is treated with contempt in our society. I think for similar reasons, because people think, well, we know who Jesus is. But do people really? Do people really understand who he is? We live in a society full of churches, full of Christian heritage, all of those things that have built Western society. And so we think we know, but do we? Do we really? For these people in Nazareth, their prejudice led to unbelief. They've already got their minds made up about Jesus. And I think that's true of our society as well. People have made their minds up about who he is. They've decided that he is either, a religious leader, or he's a good man, or he's a myth, or whatever. They've made up their minds, just like the people in Nazareth have made up their minds. He's the carpenter. That's who he is. That's all he is. How could a carpenter claim such authority? He hasn't been educated or accepted by the religious schools. He's not a scribe or a teacher of the law. He's a carpenter. He's a builder. They've made their minds up about Jesus. Pretty much almost before he even opens his mouth. And as I said, people today have their minds made up about Jesus, who they think he is. And for most of them, they think he's irrelevant. They know who he is, and they'll just put him in a box and put him away and forget about him. And it is remarkable that people do that, because when you consider the things Jesus said about himself, the things he said, the things he claimed for himself, and the things he did, or that the gospel writers tell us that he did, then you can't just dismiss him that easily. Jesus, it says here, marveled at the unbelief of the people in Nazareth. It is amazing, I think, to me, whenever we actually consider what the main sources say about Jesus, that the world seems to be able to dismiss him so easily. Jesus, the creator of time and space, becomes a carpenter. That's the amazing thing. The Son of God walks the streets of Nazareth growing up, and in this passage is rejected by his relatives. The question for us, I think, this morning is, how often do we live lives that actually reflect what the rest of the world is like, rather than what disciples of Jesus should be? How often do we read the Gospels, the Gospel accounts, and say, oh, I know that, I'm familiar with that, I can just dismiss that bit, or I can read, it doesn't bother me, or whatever. How often do we treat Jesus with contempt in our own lives? How often do we read his word, and when it challenges us to do something different, to make changes, we dismiss it. We don't listen. We reject it. We don't even let it challenge us. Let's take a fresh approach today. Let's take a fresh approach this week as we read God's word. Let it speak into our lives in this moment. Let it challenge us. Let it comfort us. Let it change us to be the people that Jesus wants us to be. God bless.